So, the only thing that I can really say about the Acolyte episode 5 is that not only do we have more terrible dialogue, terrible acting, and along with that we have a lot of reveals that make absolutely no sense, and we don't care about these characters and the fates that actually, came across themselves in this actual episode, such as the death of Jeki and Yord and others out there. But really the main thing that really stood out in this episode, and it's just sad that he has to deal with all of the characters surrounding him that are just going nowhere, where the audience just doesn't care about their existence and what they have to do, is Manny Jacinto, I believe his name is. He plays the new quote-unquote Sith, the guy that goes, "Hey," talks like that. That is the only good thing coming out of this episode, was that actor's acting capabilities. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now look, no way am I defending the Acolyte at all. I'm just saying that episode 5 was an improvement from all the 4 episodes which have been an utter disaster. But that's not saying much at all. Episode 5 was still a bore fest as far as I'm concerned. It is just nothing but mindless action. Watching a lot of lightsabers, swinging and clashing against each other in the dark, where, depending on how bright your screen is, you might not really see much of what's going on there. And a lot of that had to do with the set design was a cheap set design. We'll talk more about that later in the week, by the way, for episode 5 when it came to their budgets. Now, what's interesting about this has a lot to do with Leslye Headland and what she's been doing when it comes to damage control over the Acolyte series, and basically this is becoming a point where she's getting really desperate. She's beginning to realize that the fans are indeed the majority. She just doesn't want to admit it, so let's get into this. Now, with the Acolyte episode 5 now released, leaving Lucasfilm with 3 more episodes to drop on Disney+, the backlash has only gotten worse as of late after ongoing damage control from those like Kathleen Kennedy and Leslye Headland. Now, Headland recently delivered the following in a desperate move to save the series. I just think the backlash is blown out of proportion, and fans never really truly understand what Star Wars is about or what they want. I think episode 5 is our best episode in the series. Going in, we knew we had to top what was done in The Phantom Menace, and we did exactly that. To the fans that show any level of criticism over this episode at this point are just leaning into their own agenda and their narrative to cast blame on the support of LGBTQ in our story and for our heroes. What I have noticed is that those that still have a problem with the series are just a loud minority of fans that just can't get over their flawed way of thinking of what Star Wars truly is all about. Look, it's the High Republic. This isn't about George's vision anymore. And it's 2024, so we really wanted to adapt this thing and to break the rules of what it means to be a hero or a villain, or Sith. What I am most proud of is our support and love out there for the LGBTQ community. In the final 3 episodes, will be transparent to our audience in a way that I think it's going to resonate with so many. And the fights, oh my god, the fights are going to top some of the ones you saw in the prequels. That was my drive. That was my goal. But for fans to label this series as an agenda-driven strategy or coming from some sort of narrative, all because we want to break the rules in a franchise that's based on a new era, as big as this is, and to support diversity, equity, and inclusion, well, they really need to take the time to themselves and research on what it means for Star Wars and the evolution that comes along with it. As a woman who grew up with the expanded universe, Star Wars really changed my life in so many ways, and I wanted to cherry pick so many of those ideas and how we could use them in the High Republic. Fans will never have a clue on what they really want in Star Wars and only know how to point the finger at the flaws. I would say this series is practically flawless. We have so many characters that come from different backgrounds, and you are going to learn more about that in the next couple of weeks. I just think fans are too obsessed with this franchise keeping the same format. We had to adapt it to the modern world and to the modern way of thinking, and this will really present itself especially in 6, 7, and 8. There are some familiar things in there that will be twisted around for the fans, and I really looked up to Rian Johnson, who did such an excellent job with The Last Jedi, and how I would apply his way of filmmaking in the final episodes. So guys, before I move on about what Leslye Headland is saying, now, she's obviously very annoyed. She's becoming very annoyed. It couldn't be any more clear now that the fans will not let up when it comes to their view of how much of a disaster this show really is. You can swing as many lightsabers as you want in the dark. It's not going to change people's minds that have already, of course, seen what the Acolyte is all about. Basically how it is nothing more than a push for Kathleen Kennedy and Leslye Headland's agenda. Sure, did episode 5 dial it down on their agenda? Absolutely. Did it have terrible writing, dialogue, and acting? Yes, 100%. Did it have action? Absolutely. That may have distracted you from the terrible acting, dialogue, and everything else that came along with it. And how, we talked about this weeks ago, that episode 5's budget did take a massive dip when it came to the set design. That's why they had to dim it down in the dark, to hide how cheap the set design really looked, and how they had to implement some level of stagecraft. So what's interesting about this has a lot to do with the Acolyte episode 5 and the characters that were killed. Now we know that Jeki's out, we know that Yord is out now, he's gone. If Jeki survives those 3 stabs by Chimere, I think that fans are just going to lose it at that point, because then lightsabers are truly meaningless. But when you look at things like this, alright, like I said earlier, there are cringe moments in this episode. I mean, heck, we have May who uses a lightsaber to cut her hair to look like her twin Osha, to kind of swap sides. And the biggest criticism coming out of that is, well, number one, how did Soul not notice the stamp on her forehead, that little tattoo, whatever you want to call it, right, that came from the witches? And number two, how did Soul not sense that May was May and Osha was knocked out? How did he not sense that? So there's this move to make the Jedi into bumbling idiots in episode 5 is really what it boils down to. And I think what Leslye Headland is doing here is that quite possibly she wants to create a narrative of these B-level Jedi that really don't know what they're doing in the Acolyte episode 5, but heck, on top of everything here, she goes on to conclude, I think fans of the sequels would get a good idea about that, but Kathy and I always knew going into the series that you were going to deal with the toxic men who make it so hard for women and for female characters. It's about time women rise and take the limelight in these roles. So guys, does that sound familiar? Well, it sounds just like Charmin obeyed Chanoy, who very much said a near similar thing about the Rey Star Wars film, and yes, this thing is still apparently moving forward, and we talked about this, that there's a lot of back and forth going on right now between Stephen Knight and Lucasfilm. Stephen Knight is the writer of that movie, by the way. Charmin is the director, just to make it clear for you guys out there. But there's been a lot of things. Daisy Ridley, I will say one thing, is that she's been a very big professional so far. She's keeping her cool, she's not attacking fans at all. But she did say one simple thing about the Rey movie. Oh, it's happening. That's about it. No real updates on top of that. But again, the Acolyte episode 5, not impressive. You know, if you're focusing on the action, sure. If you're focusing on Chimere, who is portrayed by Manny Jacinto, and his acting capabilities, okay, sure, that might be a plus right there. But everything else aside, in isolation, is just terrible. Makes absolutely no sense. It really devalues the status of the Jedi, and it also has a lot of cringe elements in there, such like I talked about before when she cuts her hair with the lightsaber. That looked utterly ridiculous. What is this, the Parent Trap now? But overall, guys, drop a comment below. Fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.